Hi, it's Joy Foster, founder of TechPixies and the host of the Sparkle and Thrive podcast. And we are really excited about this interview and a couple interviews that we're hoping to do throughout this year with some of our original alumni. So Louise Bailey was one of our very first two cohorts. I sort of consider the first two cohorts one cohort because it was the very early days of TechPixies when I was just figuring out what I was doing, how I was doing it. But Louise came in our second cohort when we only had 3 women. For those of you who are starting businesses, for me, when I launched TechPixies the first time, it was government funded. So people didn't have to pay to be in the program. And then one of the caveats of getting that money was that I would be self-sustaining. Like I'd create my program funded by the government, but then I would have to sell it after that. And interestingly enough, I tried to sell it and I had 3 buyers. So Louise was one of the first people, but it was really interesting because even at that point, I didn't have a lot of confidence in my pricing. And I did a deal, which is like, okay, you pay, I think it was like 600 pounds, and then I'm going to pay you or I can't remember, you pay 500, I'm going to pay you 600. So I actually paid them more than they paid me to do the program. And that was because it was a very, very early on in early days where we did a program where they then worked for me for a couple months on a project as part of a successful completion. So, it was very early days. So much in our program has changed. We no longer offer that option, but it was my first foray into actually having to sell a product. And I remember it was a big deal. But anyway, Louise, I absolutely just love and adore you. There's so many wonderful things about you. One of the things being that you received a scholarship and then you paid it back when you got your first job. And that was also very cool. And I still have the letter that you wrote. And, when you sent the check to pay the whole thing, I'd given Louise a scholarship, in her situation, which we have scholarships at TechPixies, which we've now changed to a pay it forward scheme. So instead of giving someone a grant for the training, what we do is we effectively spread out the training over a longer period of time, and we spread out payment over a longer period of time. And we found that after doing lots of different things over 8 years, that's the new plan that we think is going to work really well. And so far, so good. It is working. But Louise, I was so grateful to you for that. I remember coming home and just opening up the door, and there was a letter, really beautiful letter. And I think I've messaged you before, but whenever I've had a tough day in business, I literally pull out that letter because it's like a kid and a dog in a laundry basket flying down the stairs, and it always makes me smile and it reminds me of what I do. So anyway, long-winded introduction to who Louise is, but she's one of our very, very first TechPixies. She went through the program, guys, 7 years ago, and she has had a transformational story. She's got her dream job, but before we get into that, Louise, tell us your story. Where were you at when you and I met, and what were you doing, and all that good stuff?
Well, first of all, I can't believe it's 7 years. That's crazy. I actually looked it up the other day because I knew we were going to talk. So I was working in the finance department in a local charity, and I was in a situation where I think I'd been there 3 years, maybe. I'm not quite sure. And I loved the people and I loved the organization and I really believed in what they did, but finance just wasn't my vibe and my fit, I guess. And I didn't really know what that was. I'd sort of gone through a few jobs, mostly administration, and always found that I was lacking the creativity, and I didn't even realize that I had that pull towards creativity until I didn't have it in my life. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I need it. And I didn't think there was a job that I could do that had both creativity and sort of my analytical brain. Certainly finance, you can't be creative. So
Well, some people are creative with
yeah,
finance,
not for very
but not
long.
in the way you wanted to be creative with it.
So yeah, I didn't really know what to do. And I was, yeah, I guess I was just sort of fairly stagnant. And then I think you were working with the company I was working for.
Yeah,
And
we rebuilt their website.
yeah, and I sort of read about you and what you were doing. And I think we had a chat and you initially invited me, I think, to sort of volunteer for a short period of time with Made with Joy, which was pre-TechPixies, which I think was mostly web-based. I'm not sure. And then whilst I was doing that, you mentioned that the next cohort was starting for TechPixies, and why didn't I come along?
Yeah. And yeah, I think we have to really talk about what it's like to be a creative in a non-creative role. It's very much being, a square peg in a round hole. I mean, that is so I think it's really interesting when you realized you were a creative person and you loved creativity and you needed that. I actually think it was doing the social media course in where you discovered that you were creative. I mean, first of all, we are all creative beings, right? I mean, we create our lives every day. you know,
Yeah.
I mean, I was just joking with my kids. I was like, I love my life. I was like, I've already dealt with a dead mouse in the dog bowl and a bee sting on my son's hand. And, like we create our life right now. Obviously I can't predict what, the dead mouse or the bee sting, but I can create my reaction to it. I can create my response to it, how I'm going to deal with it, how I'm going to look at it. I'm going to look at it with a smile or not. So
Yeah.
we create every part of our day. We if we wake up in the morning and we say, I'm so grateful for this, beautiful baby day. It's a brand new baby day. I get to start all over again. I get to do it in a new way today, or I get to discover new things I haven't discovered, or we get to create our days, right?
Yeah.
And but I think it was the social media course where you kind of woke up and was like, oh my gosh, I am creative and I love this. And that was a big wake up call for you.
Yeah, I think I had sort of done creative things as a hobby, most of my life, and then didn't really want to be a solely creative person. Like I didn't sort of feel myself as an artist, or and I wasn't really sure how creativity would then fit into a regular job, without it being solely creative. And then when we did the social media side of the course, I realized actually that it did both. So you need the analytical side, obviously for the organization and the scheduling and sort of sticking to a plan. But then making the message creative in lots of different ways on different platforms actually really sang to me.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and you did such a good job at it that you actually worked for TechPixies for a while.
I did.
You did our social media, and you were an integral part of what we did at TechPixies. You also worked on a contract of ours, Proviz, which was a outdoor sportswear company, and that gave you the opportunity to earn some money doing this creative job
Yeah.
that you didn't really know about before. So what were the skills you learned from working at TechPixies and Proviz? But then more importantly, what I want to lead to is the day that you came to me and you said, I've got my dream job, which was the first of two dream jobs. But that was a fun story. So tell us about how working for TechPixies and Proviz helped you, but more importantly, let's talk about that first dream job.
Yeah. So I think working in with Provis and with Tech Pixies, it sort of put the learning into practice, which I think is a really important part of it. And for me, I knew I wasn't going to be a self-employed person. That just wasn't my feeling. So doing what I'd learned, but for a client, actually was really important and really really interesting, actually, because trying to fit your vision with their vision, and all the challenges that may come with that or may not come with that. You might come up with something that they didn't think of, and that really helped. It sort of it trains your brain in a different way, because I mean, I'm not a runner or a cyclist, sorry. So doing an account like Provis was a bit of a challenge for me, because I was like, I need to get in the mindset of someone who wants to buy these products. And so it took a lot of research and, immersing yourself in that world. And
But you do have a dog, and one of the
I
products they
did, yeah.
launched was a dog because, by the way, what's super interesting is we were but we our team, which was the organic social media team, we were the conduit between the owners of the business and then the customers. And one thing that came up over and over and over again was, "I want one of these jackets for my dog." And we said, to Aunt and Bob, you've got to create a dog jacket. And that's gone on to be a very successful product for them, is a reflective dog jacket. So,
Yeah.
I agree with you. You have to get in the mindset of the client you're working with. And, one of the mistakes a lot of people make early on in social media is they'll take any client, but then that means they got to learn every single thing about every industry that they say yes to. So it
Yeah.
does help to niche down into things that you love. And there are a few things that you love. So talk to us about what you love.
Yeah, so I have always loved history and the past and sort of museums and heritage. That's always been a passion of mine. And again, sort of, I don't know why, I sort of closed my mind to the fact that I could ever work in that industry. And then there was sort of a light bulb moment, I think, in one of the days in the course, when I sort of came to you in a break and I was like, I could do this in a heritage setting. Like, this is crazy to me. And how do I do it? And, I know that it's a challenging sort of market to get into. It's very, very desired. And so I sort of went off and I did a bit of research and I sent out a few emails just as on spec of, do you need a volunteer to help out? And one of the emails I sent out was just to the National Trust sort of head office, I think. Didn't hear anything back. Wasn't 100% surprised. And then for some random reason, I was checking through my spam emails a couple of weeks later, and I had an email from somebody at Wadston Manor, which is a National Trust property in sort of Buckinghamshire, and basically saying, "Hi, we'd love for you to come in and chat to us." And so I did, and I met with the two lovely women from the marketing department. Had a cup of tea, and I just sort of explained my background in TechPixies, and they basically said, "When can you start?" And yeah, and so I started. I think it was 18 months overall, roughly once a week, in the marketing department with them, and they were so generous because very early on they sort of gave me hands-on tasks. It really was like, here's the Twitter account, this is the campaign we've got, please can you write some tweets, and they were really good at sort of
And you even managed their
teaching me.
website at one point, I think.
Yeah, so then after I'd been there for 18 months, then a role came up within that department as a part-time web editor, and I I went for it. I mean, it wasn't 100% where I wanted to be. I knew that web editing wasn't necessarily where I wanted to be ultimately, but I knew also that it was a foot in the door. And it was a wonderful department, and I loved the people that I worked with, and I thought, well, I'm still in that zone and I'm still learning lots. So I went for it and I got the job, which was amazing. So I got to work at the beautiful Wadston Manor every day, which is never a bad thing.
And that was a great CV builder for now your current dream job, which is so cool. Now, the thing I love about this dream job is that this was a job that went into the Tech Pixies group, and there were not just one, but there were a few Tech Pixies that went for this job, and you knew them as well. So, at Tech Pixies, we are huge fans of collaborating, not competing. But obviously, when there's a job that comes up and it's a perfect job for a Tech Pixie, you might have a couple Tech Pixies apply. So there, that was a bit of a tricky thing to navigate. And of course, that's sort of fun as well. The fact that there were multiple Tech Pixies going for a really awesome job. Tell us about the awesome job that you went for and what you do every day and why you love it so much.
So the job I went for, and I eventually got, is a digital communications officer at the Ashmolean Museum, which is in Oxford. It's a part-time role, and it's a brand new role actually in that department. So it's focusing on the commercial aspects of the museum, so catering, retail, venue hire, weddings, all of that, the membership. And it's my job. My boss always describes it as my job to champion commercial in our comms, and yeah, I love it. And at the Ashmolean, I've lived in Oxford my whole life. The Ashmolean's been somewhere that I have been on multiple school trips to, and many family trips to, and I've loved it. And I've tried before to apply for jobs there and within the university because it's a university museum, and never got past the application stage. So I didn't hold out a lot of hope, I have to say. But it just seemed like perfect timing, and it was part time, which was good for me. And yeah, I still, even going into work every day, I'm like, this is my job. This is so weird.
But I want to just point something out because Louise, we've known each other for a long time. We've known each other for 7 years. We've got a personal relationship as well. But what I love is that you messaged me when the job came up. You're like, I really want to go for this, but you had some reservations about going for it.
Yeah, so as with anything, reading the job description, I didn't hit everything on the job description, or I didn't feel like I did. And I know you know me incredibly well, and you've worked with me, and I thought, well, Joy is a better perspective than me of my own abilities. And you were so, it's advice that I've heard you give before, but it was just go for it. Even if you don't know it, you can learn it. And, I think you even said that men wouldn't look at a job description and think, I can't do this and that, and they would just go for it. So why should you? And so I did.
Yeah. And that, I think, that advice I actually read originally in the book Lean In, which was written by Sheryl Sandberg when she was the CFO at Facebook, or COO at Facebook. And she wrote the book. In fact, interestingly enough, she wrote the book before her husband died, her first husband. But she really felt that women would wait until they had 100% of the job requirements to go for the job. And she noticed that men weren't doing that. And there was another, and then I don't know if it was that book or it was a different book about Google, but they actually had to teach women how to ask for raises, and they had to teach women how to present themselves in a way that they made that they gave the evidence and the case for getting a raise. So I know at Google and at Facebook, I think they had to do that sort of training. But one of the things she really talks about is, a man will look at a job and they'll go, well, I know how to do 60% of the stuff. I'll figure the rest of it out, and they'll go for it. And I think that was really powerful information to disseminate to the world, because I think a lot of women started going, oh, actually. And then, of course, the great book, Everything is Figure Outable by Marie Forleo. Once you start to really think, wait, hang on, I'm someone that can figure things out. I can figure this out. And the thing is that I love about TechPixies is you learn, like 9 pieces of technology in like 9 weeks, so you learn so much that actually tackling a new piece of technology is sort of irrelevant. It's sort of why
Yeah.
we call it TechPixies. It's not about social media. It's about being able to just tackle tech, really. And you're great at that. And also it takes a creative mind to tackle tech. And I think that is one of the things that I love and have seen with our community is really, as women go through that initial frustration of tackling tech and like, this is hard and all that stuff, that they actually come out the other side and they're like, it's super calm, and they can tackle anything. And so it's like tackle tech, tackle anything, right? So
Yeah.
I just really I love that you held a vision for the type of job that you wanted to create. And I also love that you've been able to find work environments where people have been really supportive of you and your career and your trajectory. Now, you got to sit in on a super cool presentation by the guy who ran the Twitter feed for the Bodleian Library. Is that right?
Yeah, so that was at Waddesdon Manor. It's
But did you bring him in?
I mentioned him, but I think they were already talking to him
All right. So
after they had
tell
been
everybody
talking to him.
about him, because he's
So
super
his
cool.
name is Adam Kazari. He's actually a really good person to follow if you're in sort of the heritage space, because he writes a really cool newsletter. He's actually had quite a few jobs with really good companies, and he did something at the Bodleian which I'm not sure had been done before, but he did this thing where he would take, say, an old manuscript and the sort of the figurehead and animate it, and then sort of make funny GIFs and tweets. And so he was coming into Waddesdon to tell us about how he did that and to teach us how to make a GIF with some of the collection that they had. And it was just really interesting because it had been an account that I had followed for a while, and I'd been reading about what he'd done. And so to meet him was just really, and he was such a down to earth, like relatable person and just really funny. And he actually went on, I don't know if anybody who's listening, he went on to work for the Museum of Agriculture or something, the Merle, MERL. And he was the guy that did the big RAM, the absolute unit. So he was the person that did that, which went viral on social media. So yeah, he made a name for himself.
Well, I've put in the chat, and we'll put into the show notes the case study that Adam did for the Bodleian Library, where you can see some of the examples of the work he did, which was absolutely superb. And I'll find the link to the sheep as well, which went completely viral. So yeah, and then what's been really cool, because this is the thing, the heritage spaces and the museums, they've had to get super creative to keep
Yeah.
people interested in what they're doing, and also to keep the buzz online, because obviously it's history and you got to keep the buzz going. So tell me about some of the cool stuff that the Ashmolean's doing with TikTok and how you got to be involved in that as well.
Yeah, so I mean, as anybody knows, video is not going away on social media. So all of us, I think, in the department have had to sort of upskill in video editing and TikTok, which none of us were on before, I have to say. And one of the really fun projects that somebody else in my department has worked on is working with student animators at university and giving them an item from, or they chose an item from the collection, and they put their own creative animation spin on telling the story of that particular object. And they had to pitch for it, they had to do the design work for it, and then we sort of all together collectively sat through and looked through all of the pictures and the bids, and we chose our favorites, and they have just been beautiful. I mean, they really are just stunning works and so different as well, which is amazing because you it's a bit I always find if I've got a friend who's getting married, how many versions of a white dress can you have? And it's always a bit of a surprise to me, but the different types of animation and different styles is so amazing, and it really has brought the collection to life, and some of them have really flown and people have really loved them.
Well, and you've also created the reels for them as well, and you've gotten to do some really exciting things. I mean, I just love where you're at now. So, if you were to go back to Louise Bailey 7 years ago, working in finance at a charity, square, what, round peg in a square hole, uh, what would today's, self, the 2023 version of you who's had two dream jobs in the heritage and museum space, what would you say? What advice would you give her? Would you tell her it all worked out? What would you say?
Gosh, I would probably say don't dismiss your dreams, really. I think I had always had the dream to work in this space. I didn't know what job it would be, but I knew that that's would have been my dream. And I, as I'm sure most people do, I very quickly told myself that's not going to be your life, and that's not for you. And I think it's so important to tell people not to limit themselves like that, because anything is possible if you focus yourself on it and you have a plan, even if you get diverted from the plan. I mean, I've had ill health problems throughout my adult life, and so it's been a challenge, and I've been knocked off the path a few times. But getting back up and getting back on that path, as hard as it is sometimes, is super important, and you're worth it. Like, you would tell a friend not to give up, so like tell yourself that, because it's just such valuable advice.
Well, and also one of the things I admire greatly about you is every time you've gotten back on the path, that just reinforces your ability to get back on the path, you know?
Exactly.
And your strength and conviction and ability to follow your dreams and keep going and get back up and keep going and get back up and have a supportive group of people around you. You attract a really wonderful group of supportive people around you as well. All of that is just exceptional and is one of the reasons why you're doing what you're doing. And I just
Thank you.
absolutely love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to say I've been very lucky. I've got a wonderful family and friends, and the Tech Pixies community has been great. My fellow cohort ladies have just been a constant support in all of my applications, actually looking over my job application and like cheerleading me. And you, of course, have been. I mean, I wouldn't even be doing this if I hadn't met you that day. So thank you.
Wow. It's mutual love. And I do think, you're still involved. 7 years later, you're still in the Facebook group. You're still helping ladies out when someone has a question or wants to know something. It's just super cool how you are still supporting women years and years later, even though you're, finished, graduated, onto your dream job, making the world a better place. But you're still helping, you're still taking time out for that. Well, Louise Bailey, thank you so much for being here
Thank
today. Thank
you.
you for doing this interview. I'm sure it will inspire quite a few people, especially those creatives doing the wrong job who've given up on their dreams to really rethink that dream. And what I know from our dream building program that we run is that if a dream comes to you, you have the capacity to create it. right?
Yes.
And that's the most important thing. You have the capacity. It's whether or not you choose. Life chose you, and what are you going to do with that life? Is it worth your time, energy, effort, and money to follow your dream? And it probably is, but we got to overcome those limiting barriers and beliefs that are there. And very
Yes.
often we can't do that without support, which is why I think it's so great that you leaned into the Made with Choice support, which then turned into the TechPixies support, which then, opened some doors and helped move things forwards. But really, you had to do the work. You had to show up. You were a great student. You watched all the lessons, you did all the quizzes, you showed up for the coaching calls, and those are the kind of things that you do the work and the work works. That's what I always say at TechPixies. So you're a prime example of someone who did the work and the work worked, because you did the work, but also you didn't give up on your dreams once they were reignited. So very proud of you. Very
Thank
grateful to
you.
have you here. And Eileen is watching live, and she says, wonderful to see your dreams coming true. And Claire Louise says, this is such an inspirational story. Thank you for sharing, Louise.
Oh, thank you.
So you guys have a bit of a namesake there.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll speak to you later, and thanks so much.
No, thank you for having me. Thanks. Bye.
All right. Bye. Wow. Wasn't that fantastic? I absolutely am so thrilled to be able to invite Louise onto the podcast. And I'd love to keep doing this series with people that have gone through our program, 7, 8 years ago, and see where they're at. Because one of the things that I can tell you is the mindset shift that happens while you're in the social media management program, or the Dream Builder program, or the Business Beyond Social program, any of our coaching programs, life coaching, social media coaching, business coaching. We fundamentally work on the subconscious reprogramming. We're really working on changing the mindset, and all the other skills we give you, they're in addition to the mindset shifts. Because I know that if you make the mindset shift you need to make, that everything else will fall into place, right? So if you are interested in any of our programs, email support@techpixies.com. Join our social media superhero bootcamp, techpixies.com/bootcamp. Join our vision workshop, techpixies.com/vision workshop. We run them on a regular basis, and they're there for you to start that journey of changing your mindset and moving forward towards the life of your dreams. And I want to say thank you for watching or listening wherever you are. And if this podcast resonated with you, please share it. Please give us a recommendation on whatever podcast host you're listening on. And of course, I love personal notes. So if this touched your life in a certain way and you want to send a note to us, we can pass it on to Louise. I'm more than happy to do that. We've started to receive notes regularly in our support inbox, and they're really touching to see how one person's story affects someone else's. And so please do reach out to us if this story has touched your life. And we are nearly at 100,000 downloads of this podcast, and nearly at our 200th episode. It gives me chills. I literally have chills right now. So, if you love this podcast, please do tell people about it. Help us get to the 10,000 or 100,000 download mark. I'm going to talk about it in a few podcast episodes coming up, but I wanted to quit when we were about 64,000 downloads, and I was like, this is so hard. I think it's not going to work. And then I didn't look at the stats for a while, and I logged in, and it was 75,000. And I was like, oh, we're at 75,000. Okay, if we got to 75,000, we can get to 100,000. And so I didn't quit. And I'm glad I didn't quit, because this podcast is a lifeline for me, and it's a great way to connect with people who've gone through our program and had really amazing life transformations. And as you can see in Louise's case, it's not just a 1 year, a 1 month, a 1 week fix. It's a 7-year shift, right? She's a different person now than she was 7 years ago. Same person, just discovering deeper levels of herself. So there you go. Help us get to 100,000 downloads. Thank you for listening. I'm so grateful, and have a fantastic day.